Hi, I'm John Persinos, Editor-in-Chief of Aircraft Value News. I'm also a contributing editor at Avionics International Report. Welcome to my latest video presentation posted today, Sunday, February 22nd, 2026. A quick note before we get started. I'll be attending the ISTAT Americas show in San Diego, California, March 8 through 10. On the trade show floor, I'll be conducting interviews with experts and attendees at the show, so I hope to see you there. This week, in a pivotal 6-3 ruling, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on imported goods, and the justices did so in brutally frank terms. The court declared that the executive branch had overstepped its authority under emergency trade statutes. The majority held that the White House could not use national security justifications as a blank check to impose broad, punitive tariffs absent clear congressional authorization. It is a stunning rebuke, not just because the court is dominated by a conservative supermajority, but because it marks a rare and unmistakable break from Trump by justices he appointed. The ruling signals that even a sympathetic court will not tolerate executive overreach dressed up as economic nationalism. Trump responded with characteristic belligerence, blasting the decision as anti-American and accusing the court of undermining U.S. leverage against China and Europe. Trump vowed to find other ways to protect American industry. Markets heard something else. Uncertainty is not over, but for global aviation, the ruling is a seismic shift. For years, Trump tariffs battered the aerospace sector in ways that were both direct and insidious. Aviation is one of the most globally integrated industries on Earth. An aircraft assembled in Seattle or Toulouse is the product of thousands of suppliers scattered across continents. Wings from Japan, avionics from the United States, engines from Britain, fuselage sections from Italy, composite structures from Germany. Tariffs disrupted that choreography. Consider aluminum and steel. The Section 232 tariffs on imported metals raised input costs for aircraft manufacturers across the board. At Boeing, the cost pressures compounded crises involving the 737 MAX and supply chain fragility. At Airbus, which assembles aircraft in both Europe and the United States, the tariffs complicated transatlantic component flows and inflated production costs for its Alabama facility. The pain has cascaded down to engines. General Electric and Pratt & Whitney depend on specialized castings and rare earth inputs sourced globally. Tariffs on Chinese components and retaliatory duties from Beijing squeezed margins and slowed deliveries. For wide-body programs like the 787 and A350, where engines account for a massive share of value, cost volatility fed directly into delivery delays. Aircraft by aircraft, model by model, the distortions have piled up. The Boeing 737 MAX, already struggling to regain market trust, has faced higher supplier costs. The Airbus A320neo, its arch rival, relied on engines and avionics caught in tariff crossfire. On the wide-body front, the 787 Dreamliner and the A350 have absorbed metal price spikes and retaliatory trade penalties that have complicated deliveries to Chinese airlines, one of the most important growth markets in the world. Take a look at this chart. As you can see, Chinese demand for aircraft is vital for Boeing. Single-aisle planes, especially, form the bulk of Chinese demand. As the company struggles to rebound, Boeing has scored major contracts from China. Now, take a look at this chart. The Asia-Pacific region, which has been roiled by the trade war, represents the fastest growing aviation market in the world. Asian carriers are crucial customers for the Boeing-Airbus duopoly. And as this chart shows, tariffs are at their highest rate since the Great Depression. Cross-border trade in aircraft is adversely affected by these tariffs. Tariffs also dampen global economic growth, as we've seen in the latest economic data. Leasing companies have seen values swing wildly depending on political headlines. Supply chains, already frayed by the pandemic, have been stretched thinner by what executives have described as economic whiplash. Trump's broader rending of the Western alliance has exacerbated these strains. Aviation depends on regulatory harmonization between Washington, Brussels, London, and Ottawa. When political trust erodes, certification reciprocity slows. Deliveries stall. Capital freezes. Tariffs don't operate in a vacuum. They've been on again, off again, suspended, reimposed, expanded, threatened. That uncertainty may have been worse than the duties themselves. Airlines make fleet decisions decades in advance. Lessors model cash flows over 12 to 15 years. When tariffs can swing the delivered price of a narrow body by several $1 million, residual value forecasts become guesswork. Lease rate factors wobble. Financing spreads widen. No serious economist believes tariffs actually work. They raise costs for domestic producers who rely on imported inputs. They invite retaliation. They distort comparative advantage. In aviation, a sector built on global specialization, tariffs are especially self-defeating. This chart shows just how important aerospace is to the U.S. balance of trade. The U.S. runs one of the largest manufacturing trade surpluses in aerospace. Punitive trade barriers risk killing the golden goose. Wall Street understood that immediately after this week's Supreme Court ruling. Shares of major aerospace manufacturers and suppliers ticked higher. The Boeing-Airbus duopoly breathed a sigh of relief, not because competition disappeared, but because predictability returned. Investors can price risk. They can't price chaos. For Boeing, the court's decision eases pressure on its already fragile recovery. Lower input volatility and smoother access to foreign markets improve cash flow visibility. For Airbus, the removal of tariff crossfire restores cleaner transatlantic commerce and supports its U.S. industrial footprint. Lessors, from the largest global players to niche regional financiers, have welcomed the ruling for another reason. Aircraft values stabilize when politics steps back. Tariff uncertainty has inflated required returns. Lease rates have been incorporating a political risk premium. With that premium fading, we may see modest compression in lease rate factors, particularly for high-demand narrowbodies like the A320neo and 737 MAX families. Residual values could firm as well. When cross-border deliveries proceed without punitive duties, secondary market liquidity improves. The Supreme Court ruling reinforces the principle that trade policy is not an imperial presidency power. Congress writes the rules. The executive enforces them within limits. For multinational industries like aviation, that constitutional clarity matters almost as much as the economic relief. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. And if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to send an email to me at jpersinos@accessintel.com. And I hope to see you at ISTAT Americas March 8th through 10 in San Diego.